morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Legal Eagle. Happy International Women's Day. I have with me Dr. Anamah Tan, who is a prominent international and Singaporean women's rights advocate. Welcome to the show, Dr. Tan.
Thank you, Sarah May. It's a wonderful day, isn't it?
It is.
Beautiful.
It is. And so for listeners, International Women's Day falls on the 8th of March this year. So all of you should be celebrating men and women alike. And if you are listening to this episode on a podcast app, you should please press follow. We're actually live streaming today, so you can pop onto YouTube and see that Dr. Tan and I are wearing bright pink in homage of International Women's Day. Dr. Tan, I love the lace. It looks beautiful on you.
Thank you, Sarah. I really felt that this day is wonderful, isn't it?
It is.
Yes,
it is.
It's a celebration. It is
a celebration. And Dr. Tan needs no introduction, but I will give you a taste of the things that she's been doing internationally as well as here in Singapore. So Dr. Tan is still the only Singaporean to be nominated to the United Nations CEDAW committee. So CEDAW is actually an acronym for the Convention on All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. So Dr. Tan and I will be talking a little bit about this in today's episode. And she was one of the 23 gender experts.
Yes.
And what happens is that countries who are signatories to this convention gets reviewed every couple of years before the committee, and they have to answer on the status of women's rights in their country. Now, the CEDAW committee then will give their concluding remarks to the respective countries. And then down to ASEAN, Dr. Tan was actually the president of the ASEAN Confederation of Women's Organizations. So that's also known as ACO. And you've been doing work for them since 1992.
Oh, yes.
And I was 4 years old.
4 years old? Wow.
So you've been doing it for many, many years. Yes. And here in Singapore, Dr. Tan, with 7 other founding members in the 70s, started the Singapore Council of Women's Organizations.
No, that's the Singapore Association of Women Lawyers in the 1970s.
Yes, and SOL as well.
That's SOL.
Yes.
And then the SCWO, which is the umbrella body for all women's organizations in Singapore. In the 80s, yes.
So good. And if I understand correctly, SOL was the first legal clinic in Singapore?
Well, we ran a free legal clinic. We had 14, mind you, and at our in the various community centers in Singapore.
Amazing.
Yes, and now we actually centralized all that at the Singapore Council of Women's Organizations.
Wow, so that is the work that Dr. Tan has done, both internationally and in Singapore, and she's received national medals for work that she has done with the underprivileged and for women. And she is also known as the Doyen of Family Law. So she is the person to go to on this International Women's Day. So Dr. Tan, let's get started. You have been through so much. You've been through wars, you've been through revolutions, and you've seen so many things in your day.
Well, not so many wars. I was a baby during the Japanese occupation. That was in the 1940s. Yes, it was a difficult time during those days, and people were poor after that. Yes, we really were poor. As a result of which, my parents then gave me away for adoption. And I was brought up by this lovely Ceylonese family, and I've always considered them my parents. But there you go. Yes, but I have found my real brothers and sisters. They're a wonderful family now.
Oh, wow.
It just shows that, with pulling up your own bootstraps, you can really get out of poverty.
Yes,
and now they're all very staunch citizens of Singapore.
Wonderful.
Proud of them, yeah.
Wonderful. So we live in an age where there has been gender parity, the gap has been bridged largely. Do you feel there's still a need for International Women's Day?
Of course, I think that it's a good day too to remind us, of how important our predecessors in title
Yes.
had been working through the ages. And if you remember in the early days of how it came about, it was a group of women. It was actually a socialist, communist kind of celebration in the early days. But really, I'm really happy to see that it's become internationally acclaimed, and the UN has given us this day. Of course, we should celebrate it, because I do not think that we have actually bridged it completely,
Yes.
until that happens.
Yes.
And even when that happens, I still think that we should have this day to celebrate, if only to remember.
Yes, yes.
To remember what our predecessors in title have done, in
Yes.
order to allow us to come to this level that I am happy to be in at the moment.
Wonderful.
Yes.
And as you would have seen a lot of discrimination back in the day. What are you most proud about in terms of how we've progressed since the 40s or 50s?
I was quite, I think in the 50s, if I remember, people were still very poor in Singapore. But I think that what I'm very proud about is the fact that the education has brought us, to what I would call a little more even playing field.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, that's something I think we should be very, very grateful. Not only grateful, that we should be proud of. That education is now, 90% in Singapore, which is absolutely wonderful.
Yes, yes.
And around the world too. Around the world, I think the standard of the realization that education for both boys and girls are important for the country to progress.
Yeah.
And to see, that both male and females are really required, to develop a country.
Yes. I mean, my grandmother wasn't given an education because her younger brother needed to be educated, but that was back in the, I think, 50s. But things have really progressed now.
Yes.
I think.
Yes. And in fact, I really thank my father for being so forward-looking. He was the one who wanted me to be a lawyer.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So he encouraged you to do the law?
He encouraged me to do, not only encouraged, he forced me. In the early
Dr. Tan
days,
was forced to do the law. To read law.
I was a very obedient child. I mean, we were brought up like that.
Okay.
You're not allowed to
Question
or go against.
I find that a bit hard to believe, Dr. Tan.
Really? No.
That you are.
I am a very obedient child, yes. I was a very obedient child, and I think I've grown up to be quite an obedient grown-up. Yes.
Well, I don't think so obedient. I mean, you've had to push against a lot of pushback, and you've had to fight for what you feel is right. And
I think I was very, very fortunate. I thank the Lord for that. Yes, I was being very fortunate in that I had supporters. I mean, my father was a great believer of, I suppose, equal education. Yeah, he wanted me to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a teacher. Okay,
really?
I think, I'd love to be a teacher, but I did manage to be a teacher
as well. Yes.
So I did, and after that, I had also a very supportive husband. My late husband was very supportive of the work I had to do. And if it wasn't because of the support of, I would say, the people around you,
yes.
I don't think I would have been able to manage so much.
Yes.
Yeah, I must say, when I reflect on it, I have many things to be grateful for.
Yes.
Many things, yes.
And I think fundamentally, women's rights and the promotion of women's equality should not just be women advocates, it should be men and women.
Yes.
It should be, yeah.
It should, yeah, it is supportive, you know. Why do I say that? Because to me, even if you find, it's like what I would call being human, being, you know, having the compassion
Yes.
for, consideration for, and I think at the end of the day is helping one another.
Yes.
Yeah, the cooperation that you get.
Yes.
And look at you, Sarah May. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you, Dr. Tan.
You're wonderful that you're doing this podcast. Yes.
I mean, I'm doing this podcast so that people, because we're equipped with legal knowledge and we know about these conventions and international human rights, but a lot of people don't know. And that's really what I want people to understand, is that there should be awareness, there needs to be dialogue, people should have conversations about
True, very
these
true.
topics.
And that was why when the Singapore Association of Women Lawyers was formed by a group of us, we felt that the law seemed to be so above the normal, the ordinary person. But in fact, you know, it applies to them. The ordinary person, the law is for them.
Yes.
And therefore they should have knowledge.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's why we thought we'll bring this to the people. And we started not only translating into languages, but in those days, still now, we have English, Malay, Chinese, which is Mandarin, and Tamil, the 4 languages of Singapore. We actually did the Women's Charter in very simple language, translated that, and disseminated it amongst the factory workers. In those early days, Singapore was just going into what they call industrialization.
Yes.
So we had many workers from Malaysia around here, and we felt they should at least know the employment laws, so that they can understand what not to get anything less than they're entitled. Yes. So we did all that with the help of the human resource people, you know, in the factories. Yes.
So you would actually go into Jurong, the factories there.
We did during the lunch hours.
Wow.
Yes. And we gather them together and then speak in, you know, whether
simple
English, in Hokkien, in Cantonese, whatever, you know, whatever. In those days, although Mandarin was the language you're supposed to speak, we even had it in Mandarin.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So much of work that's been done.
Yeah, and then the women lawyers were really very enthusiastic about wanting to spread this. And then of course we ran free legal clinics. We were one of the first few to do that. And that's how we started as in the Singapore Association of Women Lawyers. We're still a very small group, because to us it doesn't matter. It's, you know, our ladies have to, you know, get married, have children, and we lose them during that period. But we normally try to encourage them to come back to serve
the community.
Yes.
And you have done a lot of work at the United Nations as well. Can you tell our audience about how you actually got a seat? Did you have to fly around the world for interviews? How did it work?
Well, I must say this. You know, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, it has been around in the United Nations. Singapore became a signatory to it in the 1995s.
Okay.
Yeah. And I must say we all worked quite hard towards it. How did I get? Well, I actually was surprised, very surprised, but It was through the Ministry of Community Development then.
Wonderful.
Yeah, the minister then was Mr. Abdullah Tamuji. He very kindly called me one day and had a meeting with his secretary, deputy secretary, and just asked me if I was interested to serve in the UN CEDAW. And of course my eyes lit up. You know, it is really a great opportunity for anyone to be able to serve in that committee. It's one of the very, what I would call one of the UN conventions which has some teeth, because governments, it's actually a government to government kind of thing, yeah.
Yes.
And the governments that have signed up now is 180 something. It's almost universal. Yeah.
Amazing.
A few of the countries have not signed up yet. I hope they will.
Yes.
So how was I even considered? Well, I must say that at that point of time, I don't even the minister, I didn't know whether or not it was something that I could do. But you know, we have to always try. I mean, even though I felt, no, how am I good enough? Yeah. Do I know enough about things, about women's rights, things like that? Although I've been working on that for many years before that, and really, I didn't feel I was an expert, okay, because they are experts, yeah, that sit on the committee.
Experts from all around the world,
all over the world,
professors
yes.
of law,
Yes.
deans of law school. These are prominent people that are chosen
Yes.
to the committee.
Correct, yes. And you have to stand for elections.
Oh my.
Well, this is one of the things that I really had what you call not only a steep learning curve, but a perpendicular learning curve. I wouldn't even call it a curve, it was a perpendicular up learning, that
straight
way,
line.
straight line up. But it was a real eye-opener for me when I was elected. Our it's actually quite a government body kind of thing, yeah? And I being NGO from the start, and my heart is always there, yeah?
Yes.
And we felt that it was important. We felt as an NGO community, how important it was to be able to serve the global community in this way. Yeah. It's a term for 4 years, and I remember when I first was asked, it was quite a nice collegial kind of meeting, and suddenly I was just asked like that, and of course, without thinking straight, I straightaway said, yes, of course I'm interested. Yes. But really, I did tell the minister that after that first burst of enthusiasm, I said, I'd like to ask my husband first. And I can tell you, it's not because I'm afraid or anything of that, like that. It's just that it's always better to get your spouse, who's the closest to you, to support you on this. Otherwise, on your own, you will not be able to manage it. Because you'll be away from the home, you'll be away from your family. And if I remember correctly, I was told, it's a 2-week meeting in 2 weeks, maybe twice a year, And I thought, oh, 2 weeks, I think I can manage that. And because I have a job to do, I was working.
Running a very successful law firm.
I was in a law firm.
Yes, and very busy. So
busy
2
law
weeks.
firm, And to take 2 weeks off, of course I have to also ask my employers whether it's all right, but it was okay. But then I said to myself, I should be okay. Well, 2 weeks is not too much, right? But it wasn't. At the end of that, it wasn't, because there were, we had to clear backlogs. There was a backlog of reports. Reports.
Yes.
You see, every 5 years, a country that has signed up has to report to the committee.
Yes.
And the report is on the whole country.
Yes.
So we have reports from the government, and we have reports from the non-governments as well. We have reports from, stat boards or other independent, organizations, that will that deals with women's rights.
And you
in
had
that country.
You had to read,
We had to read all that.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work,
reading.
But it's also very, very interesting because you really had a range of reports.
Yes.
Because the government always says what wonderful things they have done for their country in respect of women's rights. And then
alternative
shadow reports, which says sometimes just the opposite, sometimes it says things that are, but those reports we always look at, and we meaning the committee actually hears, we have a special hearing just from the NGOs, so that we can establish for ourselves, and we can ask them questions too. And when the government gives their reports, and we question the ministers that come.
Yes.
And I think our questions are quite relevant and to the point, because we get also from the shadow reports, so to speak, and we sift through them.
Yes.
Because it has to be something that has substance.
Yes.
So the shadow reports are very important, and I think that the people who are working on the ground must understand that it is important for establishing what really is happening on the ground.
Yes.
And governments, I think, should also realize this is for their own good too.
Yes.
It's for the whole nation's good.
Yes. And a lot of criticism mounted against international law and international human rights is that you have sovereignty of the state and these organizations are not powerful, they have no teeth. But I personally was actually at the UN CEDAW as an intern in 2010, and I saw how the committee would ask the government specific questions after questioning the NGOs, and I learned for myself, this is a body with a lot of teeth.
Not only a lot of teeth, but the body can hold the government responsible.
Accountable, yes.
Because it is actually the government's responsibility at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They have to take that responsibility.
Yes.
And the NGOs can actually help along this process. It's actually helping your own people. So I think it is important. It's a very important, what I would call collaboration, between the state and the people, the ground, and to achieve the best results. And I think we in Singapore did that quite nicely, in a collaborative
manner.
way.
In fact, Dr. Tan, I heard that you were quite pivotal in bridging the gap. Because when I was at the UN CEDAW, I realized that there's a huge dichotomy, disparity. You have the government and then you have NGOs, and they're like two camps. But from what I understand, you were actually part of bridging the gap for Singapore at the UN CEDAW.
That was during our our
in your
reporting,
time, yes.
during our time was because we I think at that time I was also heading the umbrella body, and we had been we were very active also
Yes.
in giving, during the select committees
Yes.
reports in Singapore,
Wonderful.
on amendments to the Women's Charter and things like that. So we did play quite a pivotal role, but it is actually the building of trust, between the non-governmental and the government, and what you observe, Sarah, is really very, very important to put across, because it is true that usually it appears as though they are in a collision. But in fact, I think the important thing is you should be in collaboration.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because in order to move forward, so the building of the trust is so important. So I think we as NGOs is still continuing. Building of the trust takes time, takes effort. It also takes a lot of understanding where one's interest is and how it should be for the best interests of the community as a whole. And we have to understand, if we understand each other's limitations, we can actually work towards pushing what I would call the boundaries, to the extent of understanding why we need certain things to be done in a certain way.
So it's all about a dialogue between the two groups.
And it's so important, not only the dialogue, but the understanding and the cooperation of the parties, of all the, I would say, all the stakeholders.
If only all countries could think this way.
But because I suppose we are small in the way, I hate to think that, we are small and therefore we are limited. No, I think if we're small, we can do things faster, because you can attend to the problem straight away.
Immediately,
But then even if you are big, it may take a little bit of time, but if you train your people, so that's why we believe in training trainers, so that then they can go out to the community
and empower those communities. So Dr. Tan, a lot of human rights in certain cultures have been denied on the basis of cultural relativism. So I personally feel that in culture you have dynamic culture and you have static culture. So dynamic culture is when a culture holds on to its premise of what culture is and refuses to have a dialogue of any changing norm, whereas a static culture keeps the fundamental intrinsic value of the culture but still adapts it to the changing tides of the norms. And a lot of countries say, no, we cannot give these women rights because it's on the basis of our culture. What do you have to say to that, and do you have experiences with such?
Very much so, especially at the UN committee. At the UN committee, you see, that's the problem. When you have cultural norms or traditions that tend to close up. The CEDAW has this very interesting article, and we always use that for the purposes of what you say, this changing of mindsets. It may take a whole generation, but we cannot afford the time. So we must try to move as fast as we can. And that's where the CEDAW comes in. They will question the governments, and even if you say, this is the cultural tradition, well, the cultural tradition may have to make certain changes. And the changes would be for the betterment of the community, the whole community, the whole nation, to move forward. So, things like, for example, polygamy. Now, in certain cultures, polygamy is the norm. sometimes it's part of a religion, so to speak. Yeah, I'm not mentioning things like that just to cause any
Chaos
division
or
or anything like that.
Yes.
But even when it comes to that, and we do question the traditional cultures. Yeah, and if you really dig deep into what they say is a religious
position,
thing,
and yes,
it is not. And we have people on the committee, yeah, who have questioned that and comes from that same religion and culture, and they have questioned, and I'm very happy to say that things are moving slowly, but moving forward at least to make it certain that even if you say it is the culture, it should not be what I would say cause any kind of discrimination in that entire community.
Yes.
Yeah, when it causes a discrimination, the CEDAW comes in. Yeah, so that they can make some
concluding remarks.
Yes, and those concluding remarks are supposed to be acted upon. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and they have to, and the governments will have to answer at the next round
okay,
what they have done towards it. So that's where we see the incremental changes, and so long as changes are being made, it's sometimes they call like a dance, has 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yes.
We try not to have a step back.
Yes.
We try to keep inching forward.
Yes.
And I think that we hope one day that we don't even need the convention.
Yes.
Yeah, but
unfortunately we still do.
Oh yes,
very
we do.
much so.
Because it comes in all kinds of forms.
Yes. I remember when I was in West Africa in 2009, I went into a remote part of Accra, outside Accra, in Ghana, and we spoke to some tribal chieftains, and they couldn't understand why women needed to inherit property in those customary groups because it was patrilineal. So property would just get passed down from father to son, from son to brother, and women couldn't inherit in certain customary groups. And that was 2009. And
yes, and it's still existing
today.
Still existing, which is why CEDAW comes in, and in those in Ghana actually is quite forward looking. But in land rights is one of the most I would say important things, and we in CEDAW look out for that definitely. And it is a changing, because sometimes we have lots of stories where widows just get thrown out of the estate, and and then goes and they become really poor, and and we find that very, very disconcerting. And times are changing, thank goodness for that. And I believe that in time to come, those kinds of cultural or traditional reforms will have to come about. And and the way to do it is, I suppose, the legal way first. You have to have the laws, and then the implementation of those laws. And that takes what I would call the government's powers to be able to do that. It's changing of mindsets. And changing of mindsets may take some time, but it has to begin somewhere. So I'm glad that we are, at least the beginnings are already there in some countries. Thank goodness, as I said, there are more than 180 over countries now.
Wonderful.
So slowly we'll get there. We'll get there.
And do you have any anecdotes from your time at the UN, or you've traveled all around the world, to Africa, to Europe. Can you share with the audience an anecdote, specifically on the issue of women's rights that really made an impression
Well,
on you.
you know, sometimes when we talk of women's rights only, don't forget they also have now children's rights, and that's very
Yes,
important.
yes.
And that is universal, you
Yes,
know.
yes.
All countries have signed on that.
All countries.
Yes,
Amazing.
yes.
Yes.
And when it is universal,
Yes.
then of course, and I think that one too has some clout. So if we work like that, I think that, you know, you change mindsets, children. Yeah, that's where we begin.
Yes.
Yeah. So okay, what I'm excited about is there are changes. We can see that. One very interesting thing that has come about is in Malawi, there is this chieftain,
Okay.
yeah, lady chieftain. She's the
Okay.
head of all the
Oh,
chiefs,
wow.
yeah, and her name is Teresa Kachindamoto.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and she's got a very interesting name. But Miss Teresa has, now that she's head of all the chieftains, has managed to convince the other male chieftains to agree with her that child brides or child marriages should be abolished.
Amazing.
Yes, and you know, child marriages, they have children. Yeah, and special camps for children, female children only, yeah, to be, how to be pleasing to the males, to the males, so they can be the child brides.
So they're groomed.
Yes, they're
Oh
groomed.
my goodness.
Yes,
And this happens today.
Yes,
in
and
Malawi.
and I'm glad that
She's doing something.
Miss Teresa Kachindamoto is doing something, not only doing something about it, but doing something to abolish all these. But it takes
Amazing.
time because these are traditional. They say it's traditional, it's cultural, but hey, it's not really, you know. Child brides really are a bane, and I'm glad there are changes. Although I still see in the reports that come up, it's still occurring, you know. Yeah, it is.
It's
and
unjustifiable.
it is,
to
and
have
under
that.
the children's rights,
Yes.
it cannot be. So the laws have to be changed
Yes.
first,
Yes.
and then I think from the laws, you then can enforce those laws.
Yes.
And when it is being enforced fairly, equally, and you know, and
Across the
judicially
board.
across the
Yes.
board, I think the norms will change.
Yes, because I think the big criticism is you can have the laws, but de jure.
Yeah.
So you can have the laws, but in reality, it's not being implemented.
Yeah.
So you need these NGOs, these grassroots organizations. You need the government implementing policies to allow the laws to be
happen.
translated.
Yes.
That's so important.
Not only translated, but to be implemented
Yes,
and to
yes.
be enforced.
Yes.
Because the enforceability we find, unfortunately, is lacking in some countries. But if one has to come to keep reporting to the CEDAW, it's not going to look very good, isn't it?
Yes.
If they don't do anything about it. But let me hope, and I think I have faith that when governments say they will do something, they will do it. But NGOs, activists, those who are on the ground, it's your responsibility too,
Yes.
to ensure that whatever your government is supposed to do, that you help them to do it, because it is for the good of our people.
Yes. Of
Yes.
everyone,
Yes,
not just
yes.
women, for children, for men, for communities.
And I hope they realize it's also good for the men.
Yes.
Because you see, without this kind of, I would say, improvements, yeah? For example, education is one. Suppose it had been like in the old days when it's only the boys that get the education and the girls that don't. Can you imagine? I mean, you have said that your grandmother,
Yeah.
but just imagine if your grandmother had the opportunity, I'm sure
She would have been a
she would
CEO
have
of a
been one.
multinational company.
There you
I'm
go.
sure.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very, very capable woman, but
Very.
just didn't have the opportunities. But that's changing.
It's changed now.
It's definitely changed now. And Dr. Tan, you're also doing a lot of work in the ASEAN region.
Yes.
You're still involved with ACO.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do there?
I've been involved with them for a long time. That's because of my passion, my interests, and I do that voluntarily. Yeah. So really, at the end of the day, it's how you want to, whether you really are keen and wanting to make sure that the changes are effective. ACO has been around since now it's 30 over years.
Wow.
So Singapore is now the president. They go by rotation.
Oh, okay.
So now we have 10 countries. So 10 countries means once in every 20 years it comes round. So the last time when I was president, it was in 2002, I think.
Yes, 2002.
2002, and 20 years now, yeah. Dr. June Go is now the president of ACO.
Yes.
She's also the president of the CEDAW. You see, you have to be the president of your national umbrella body to be a member of the ACO.
Okay.
So that is the NGO arm of the ASEAN.
Yeah. Okay, so ACO is related to the ASEAN.
It is related in the sense that it came about. It's the women's, and our first president was from Indonesia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. And so you still fly around ASEAN for conferences?
Yes, for conferences I do. I mean, they invite me. They're so kind as to.
Why wouldn't they invite you?
You have to go by invitation. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but the ASEAN women, they're very, very active. A lot of women, and for example, like Kowani is the Indonesian one. Ibu Maprotomo, who is still alive. Yeah, she's good. Yeah. She's getting on in years, but she was the first one, and those early days, we used to meet, but now it's become like it's a body already incorporate, and we have our ED, our executive director in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, and as I said, the presidency is by rotation. So rotation, Singapore's turn now, and then it goes round. Yeah. So when Singapore finishes her term, then what happens is that you go down to the bottom of the list. So you become the 6th director or something like that. Okay. And then every 2 years, so that there is, not only that, but the country knows when is their turn.
Okay.
Yeah, because
so they can plan for it.
They plan, yes.
Wow.
And usually the planning they do we do a 5-year term, 5-year plan, and then we keep on doing,
So much work that goes into all of this.
Yeah. But at least, this the meeting is usually we do what they call centralized workshops and things like that. Yeah.
Yes.
So, but a lot depends on the community, and I'm happy to see that the ASEAN community is getting
more active,
more and more.
Yes.
An eagle flies high, way up in the sky. It sees above the human eye, a different perspective, a broader directive. In doing so, it becomes more effective. Welcome to The Legal Eagle, a podcast where I examine aspects of the law that I'm passionate about. I'm your host, Sarah May Thomas, and my aim is to have conversations that will empower both professionals and the everyday person on the street.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit to family law, and specifically seeing it through the lens of gender parity. Dr. Tan, as I mentioned, is a doyen in family law and is an expert on the topic. So Dr. Tan, one hotly contested topic is the issue of women's maintenance. So for audience on the podcast and on YouTube, in Singapore, women can ask the court to rule on the issue of wife maintenance, but men cannot, unless they're incapacitated. So some people say, no, men should be entitled to husband maintenance. Dr. Tan, what do you have to say on that?
You know, this is not a new issue. I have been fortunate to be, I always believe that if you happen to be there at the right time, in the right place, and you can do something towards, making changes, do it.
Yes.
So I happened to be at the right time, in the right place. So I had been involved in some of the major changes in the Women's Charter. So select committee is something that we always want to be represented at the Singapore Association of Women Lawyers.
So and is the select committee a committee that
it's formed by the government.
Okay.
It's formed by Parliament actually, the select committee. And usually if there's a change, for example, in the law and change in the Women's Charter, as I said, then what happens is there will be a select committee of both government and the opposition.
Yes.
And they will then say, okay, you people from the public here, you want to make representations, you can. So as an organization, we do make representations. And the representations do bear fruit, I must say.
Yes.
And at this select committee, we ask questions why we think that this is a good amendment we want to make. And I think that the airing is very good and very, very, they ask quite pointed questions, and we give them back the answers which are obviously of relevance to them, because the changes are made, and I'm quite happy that that some of the changes that we had asked for
are implemented.
Are there. Now, how was it? Your question was
about wife maintenance and about men not being able to claim.
Well, this came up quite a number of times amongst our own people. We discussed this too.
Yes.
I think at this time, the earlier time when there was this discussion in Parliament, it was still, I think women were still earning about 70% of what the men were earning. So at that point of time, our views were very, very strident. We said no until such time as we have parity, not only parity, but equality of, dollar for dollar.
Yes.
We still haven't, we still have a little way to go. Not little, I think some ways to go, but not as much as the 70% like before. It's whittled down to something like below 10%. So it's okay. I mean, it's not so bad now, but you can see that there are changes. I keep telling all my male colleagues, look, the Women's Charter is not only for women, it's for men and women. It's for the whole community.
Everyone.
Yes. So when you say, why only the women, only the wives get? But really at the end of the day, if you look at the maintenance, the wife may get maintenance, but it's never the full amount that she requires.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? That means she has to do something else in order to earn the extra bit, in order to give the family, it's not only her family, mind you, the family, the things that they require, the necessities they require. Yeah. So if you look at it from that point of view, you will notice that it's not the full maintenance. But now it's amended, as you can see, slightly. And the time will come, at some point of time, where maintenance may be paid by the party who is earning maybe more, or to support, for example, the husband who may be incapacitated, and I think that's fair. because now the women are earning
Yes.
quite nicely too.
Yes.
Well done, ladies.
Yes.
Well done. I'm proud of you. But I think at the end of the day, it is a question of fairness. What is fair to this family? That if they do need the help of maintenance, then it should be paid. Whoever has to pay it is the person who is able to. Yeah. So if at the end of the day the wife is the sole breadwinner, then of course I think it's only fair that she has to pay for the maintenance of the whole family. I mean, but that is a choice. It's a choice she made when she married her husband. Right?
And have you ever encountered a situation where you had a house husband?
Oh yes, yes, I encountered this. In fact, I encountered this years and years ago, before this problem came up. And then, unfortunately, there was a divorce. And I found it so difficult to point out to the learned judge. It was a male learned judge, mind you, who kept saying, why isn't the husband working? He should be working. And as a result, at the end of the day, he didn't get very much of the wealth that was accumulated. And the wealth was actually due to the wife and the husband. Although the husband was a house husband, and they agreed between themselves that he would be a better person to look after the family, and they had 3 children, all right? The case is over, so I can talk about it. They had 3 children. This was something like 20 over years ago, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So now I hope
Things
it's fairer, yeah,
Yes, I'm
for the
sure
house
it would
husband.
be.
For the house husband.
Yes.
But he did get something, and to be fair to him, and I really think he did well as a house husband. He really looked after the children, and I got for him joint custody and joint. But the can control, it was so difficult even to get a shared can control. And it was can control to the wife. But I managed to get a lot of access for him, which was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was just as good as if it was shared can control. But in those days, no such
Usually
things.
went to the mother.
Always. In those days, it always. But it was also, I think, due to the hard work that we all did.
Yes.
We felt that it was best that the children were with the mother. And generally, I would say, generally is correct, is true. But not always. Not always. I think the children do need both sets of parents. But if only there was less acrimony, which I think now is happening, because now, as you know, it's really child-centric.
Yes.
When it comes to
the best interest of the child.
Correct. Well, the law has always been in the best interest of the child, but it's taken quite some time, and it's a hard work of all the NGOs and also the work of the family court judges now.
Yes.
They are a lot more
enlightened.
And now we have also collaborative law, collaborative family law, in the sense that when they split, but then there's certain rules regulating that.
Can you tell listeners what is collaborative family law?
Oh, collaborative family law is a very I would say it's newish, and there's some practitioners. I happen to be one of them. That do collaborative law, and I think that is also good. But the thing is this, when it comes to collaborative law, number one, there must be absolute transparency.
Yes.
And once we are engaged in it, and then they decide that they want to go back to doing either contested, then we cannot act for them, which I think is fair.
Okay.
Because we would have known exactly everything there is to know about the other party.
Okay.
Yeah. In collaborative law, you don't do anything without the other party knowing. Yeah. So it's absolute frank
Disclosure.
And transparency.
Which in many cases would be very successful in bridging the gap and effecting
Correct.
amicable.
But it needs not only the parties to be not ready. That's why we have some criteria how we think that the parties are ready. But the lawyers have also to be
on the same page.
On the same page.
Yes.
And I must say we had some very successful, and they're usually with high net worth kind of clients. And it does save a lot of acrimony and it saves a lot of costs.
Yes.
That's the important thing. Saves costs and it preserves the family togetherness.
Yes.
Because when they have children, you don't want to have, the difficulties of what I would call resentments that are carried on after the divorce.
Actually, while we're on this topic, Dr. Tan, you have had to counsel many clients of yours who have been harboring bitterness, resentment, hurt, sometimes not 5 years, but 30 years, 40 years, I don't know how long. What is your advice to these clients of yours when they're so angry? They're so hurt that whether there's domestic violence, there's adultery, there's cheating, the children are involved. How do you handle it?
Gosh, it's hard, but it's really... In fact, I just did one not too long ago, 2 days ago. It took a lot out of me, but I felt that I had done something good for this person, this lady. It's difficult for them, it's difficult. And I had a very good judge, so it was an appeal that I had just done. And the judge had given us some very good... and really, this was something I spent more than 2 hours with the client to try and, And I must say, at the end of that 2 hours, she went off feeling a little bit better about herself. At the end of the day, I said, you have to move on. And that's what the judge told me to tell her. I'm so glad nowadays the family court judges are very, very empathetic, sympathetic. Empathetic, I think, is the right word, because they know how to empathize with. This was, as I said, an appellate in the appeals, appellate jurisdiction. But I'm happy that at the end of the day, this young, she's not that young, she's in the 50s. The resentment and this is more where after about 30 whatever number of years, they're married. She's known the husband since she was 15. Now she's 50 something, 55 or something like that.
Most of her life.
So all of her life, I think. So she feels very hurt, and I'm afraid the hurt is still continuing even though they've been divorced. And I hope with I intend to keep on holding her hands, even though after I finish my job, so to speak. But your job as a matrimonial lawyer, or as a family lawyer, is never finished, because, at the end of, I always think of, what's happening to this person? And then I just pick up the phone and...
That's so wonderful, Dr. Tan.
How's everything? Yes. And to show that really I do care for them, that's why.
Yes, it's not this cut and dry, finish the case and get it over with. You really have to empathize.
That's the way it should be, cut and dry and finish. But there are some of these clients where you feel that they need some hand-holding, and then you try to manage, their expectations, and then, because they're bound to have, when they have children, it's very difficult. And especially teenagers. It's very difficult to handle teenagers. Even when there's a complete family, they're bound to be, So
testing boundaries.
Testing boundaries, So we have to explain, and really, I think I should have taken psychology as
As a
another
degree.
subject, but I did in the course of your work. In the course of your work, you have to pick all this up.
Yes.
It's just a question of a lot of common sense, no doubt.
Yes.
And thank
Also-
God, I think I was born with some common sense.
And also empathy and being able to counsel your client. You're not just a lawyer, you really have to show them the big picture.
Yes. You actually a lot of things. You're also them like father confessor or mother confessor,
Yes.
They come to confess all sorts of things
Oh
to you.
my.
But that's how, if you get that trust, you see.
Yes,
This
yes.
is a trusting between you and your client. And after a while, after you finish with them or you finish your case, I have one who has become my friend. She's such a thoughtful person, very, very considerate. But, it's the show of you really care for them. I do care for my clients. I don't know whether fortunately or unfortunately, but I do, even if they're no longer my clients.
Yes.
I believe that at the end of the day, forgiveness is so important.
Absolutely, yes.
Learn how to forgive, maybe you cannot forget, but the earlier you can forget, the better too, I think, for your peace of mind.
So Dr. Tan, we're going to wrap up today's
Okay, yes,
episode,
yes.
but do you have any advice for someone who might be going through a divorce, who's struggling emotionally? What advice would you give to that person?
Oh, wow, that is difficult to say because different people, have different levels of tolerance, and it depends on how hurt the person is, how long the marriage has been, how happy they had been. I always try to bring them back to the time when they were most happy. Try to think of that and see what good things you can think about those times. And then of course look at the children. Look at that. It's their future. Is it your future with them? It's how you want to make it. So I can tell you one thing, Sarah, having gone through and sat through and held clients and cried with them and whatever, it's the worst thing to have to go through a divorce. It's worse than a death. At least a death you have
Finality.
some finality. You know that. But with this, there's continuing. And there will be continuing hurts. There will be. And I really hope and pray, and I try to get my clients when they are never use the children. Please, when you have the children when you are having them for access, please enjoy them. Find out about them, how they are. Don't ask about your ex-spouse or what's happening. Why do you want to hurt yourself? To me, if only this can come across. And yes, there are what they call post-divorce counseling. There should be. It should be a continuing thing, because really they have to learn how to manage
The life after.
their life. And I try to tell the clients that I have, hey, there's a life after this. Please look after yourself, look after the little or whatever that you are able to get out of the marriage, maybe your share of the matrimonial assets, look after that. Oh, by the way, even the share of matrimonial assets, you say as a counselor, we also have sometimes to advise them on their financials. So you really ought to know everything there is, and if you don't, then get a financial person to help them. But I feel that you really ought to know
so many
a
things.
little, a lot about other things as well. But the most important is relationships. How to handle relationships.
Yeah.
And that one you can't learn from a book, you know.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So
Good
I don't
advice,
know.
Dr. Tan. Thank you for that. And you've been a lawyer for what, 54 years?
Oops, 58, I think, or something like that. 50.
Oh, many
Long.
years.
I mean, I'm older than you, I think.
Slightly older.
In that, yeah, no, a lot older, yeah.
And you have also been a women's rights for the equal amount of time, probably even longer.
Yeah.
Probably since you were your teenager. What is the one thing that you would like to say about the state of women's rights as it is now, and what is your charge to the community?
The state of women's rights. I mean, how I would like to see it would be equal, all right? But I notice that sometimes when you have economic power, our women don't seem to be different from the men when they have economic power. They want to dominate, which I think is difficult to do, I'm sure, not to dominate.
Yeah.
Just be sure of that. And try to always put yourself in the other party's shoes. And then you ask yourself, when I do this, how would I feel if I were in the other party's shoes? And if you feel, oh, it's terrible, then don't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, why do it? Because you want to feel you're empowered? No, the really empowered person doesn't need to dominate.
Absolutely.
And I think that is important, that when we, meaning you as a female, and you are in that powerful position, try to be compassionate. Try to understand. If you understand, you will be compassionate. And you will do the right thing. How do you know you will do your right thing? Your conscience will tell you. Yeah. And I hope that when we are in positions of power, we would consider that very carefully. Don't dominate. Don't overpower. And don't be smug about it.
Yeah. Because a secure person doesn't need to overcompensate or bulldoze their way.
True.
They're secure and established. So that's really excellent advice, Dr. Tan. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Tan, for joining us on today's episode. For listeners and YouTubers, please subscribe to the show, and we've got lots of exciting episodes up. International Women's Day, 8th of March, hold an afternoon tea, maybe do a talk in your local community, get some men and women together and celebrate this wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode. Have a lovely day, and I'll be seeing you soon.
Happy Women's Day.
Yes.
We make it a family.
Yes.